Hey folks, Chris Vandeviver here with Logic Pro Expert. Now in part 2 in our guitar mix-off between Eli and I, we've gone ahead and approached the same exact song but using third-party guitar emulators, pedal boards, and some third-party plugins, just to see how it might sound with some alternate plugins aside from Logic's included amp designer and pedal board. So we have the exact same performance, but with new plugins. And you can see here that my main plugin that I've chosen is actually Presonus's Ampire, which was recently released as an AU plugin. And I gotta say, I enjoy it quite a bit. Let's take a quick listen to the beginning intro section of this song. Cool. I think it's safe to say that I've taken some hints from Eli since our first round of mixing this song. Instead of working with a gritty guitar tone for each of the rhythmic guitars, instead, I decided to use, a Fender amp through a Vox cab for one guitar. So if we solo it, take a quick listen. And then for the second rhythm guitar track that plays at the same time, I have used the Fender head, but through a Fender cab to give like a tonal variation. And very little processing. I'm using a compressor before the amp, just because Ampire doesn't come with its own compressor pedal. So I decided to use the Logic compressor ahead of the amp, just to tighten things up and help the guitar sit up a little more. I also have very, very little EQ. So channel EQ that's just kind of rounding things out in the low mids, boosting the upper mids and highs, high pass filter, and over here, just about the same thing without the high end boost. And then with this guitar lead, I still had to make it a little weird. Instead of using step effects this time, all I'm using is Ampire with the chorus 1 pedal beforehand. Take a quick listen. And a touch of reverb from the amp itself. I also decided to use a compressor before and after, just to tighten up on both ends. Next to no EQ. And I'm using Oak Sound Soothe because there were some resonances down in the low end that, just didn't sit well with me. So let's take a listen with it bypassed. So not as prominent, and I like that. I like how the pick scrape part is a little brighter than the 2 rhythm guitar tracks. And I really didn't do much with the amps. I just played with the tone knobs until it felt good to me, and I kept it on the vibrato side even though I'm not using vibrato at all. Moving forward, let's take a listen to this clean guitar part here. I used the same exact amps from guitar rhythm A and B, and I applied it to D and E here. So there's no difference in the amp department. Compressor beforehand, a little bit of channel EQ just to adjust the tone a hair. And I also have my instances of Waves Factory's track spacer. I cheated a little bit in my first video, but I'm just using track spacer on each rhythm guitar part to carve out a little space when the lead plays, so the lead is more prominent in the mix. Take a listen. And if we bypass track spacer, it's like the lead just suddenly pops out a little more. I really love it for that. The console EQ on every single track just to add some drive, a little analog vibe. And then the lead actually received quite a bit of processing, which I didn't expect. We start with a compressor just to tighten things up before it hits the amp. And with the amp, I stuck with a Vox emulation for both the amp and the cab. So let's solo the lead here. Play a section right down here. And I have the tube driver just to drive this amp a little harder. So let's turn it off. Bring it back. And And I have it on the brilliant section here. And I've adjusted the tone. That's about it. And again, I have a channel EQ with a high pass and reducing a tiny bit in the mids. Another compressor to tighten things up. After that, I have Soothe from Oak Sound, again for some of those resonances. Bypass it. Just seems a little cleaner to me with Soothe 2 on. After that, I added Spiff from Oak Sound because I was noticing some fret noise that I just didn't notice the first time around, that didn't really pop out to me as much as it does now. But I ended up going ahead and chopping up where every time I heard a fret noise that I didn't like and reduced it in volume. So if we go to the region inspector, I reduced these by varying degrees, mostly by 6, but -12 there. A little less prominent now. But I still felt it necessary to use Spiff to tighten up those fret noises as the guitarist is playing. Check it out. And again, my Melda auto volume to help this guitar lead ride above the rest of the mix. Sidechain is set to bus 11. And if we go into the mixer, bus 11 is where everything else other than the lead is being sent. And the delay for this particular guitar lead, I decided to forego my pedal board delay processing. And I tried out some other options, but ended up with Echo Boy Jr. on the studio tape. An 8th note delay, ping pong. I think it sounds pretty freaking awesome. One other note to point out is that for some reason this time around the drums felt a little too bright to me when the cymbals came in. So I decided to use the console EQ and reduce by just a decibel with the high band. And you can see that I've automated it to turn on right when the cymbals kick in. So if we take a look. And you can see that the EQ turns on right at bar 10 to reduce that high end by just a decibel. So I hope that was helpful for you. Once again, I'm Chris Vandeviver with Logic Pro Expert.